Top 10 all-time favourite vampire movies. Hello and welcome to another video, and I thought this week I'd do something a little bit different and talk about my favourite vampire movies. I love vampires. Vampires, everything from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to The Little Vampire to the movies I'm going to talk about here. You can't beat a good bloodsucker. Well, let's get on with it. Fair warning, there's going to be a fair few old school Hammer movies in here, though probably not at the very top. Number 10, the original Dracula from 1958, also known as Horror of Dracula in the United States, the original Hammer Dracula, with Christopher Lee as Dracula for the first time and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. Now, I can appreciate that some people find this a little bit dated. And to be fair, the first time I watched it, the first 10 or 15 minutes, I was a bit iffy on it. Particularly the guy who plays Harker, whatever his name is. I found him a bit of a wet fish. I wasn't overly impressed. But then when the film really kind of kicks into gear, when we get Peter Cushing introduced as Van Helsing, and Peter Cushing's just pure class. And like the best of the Doctor Who's, like Tom Baker and John Pertwee and what have you, he puts such authority and gravitas into what he says, and when he's talking about vampires and that, you just totally buy every single thing that comes out of his mouth. It's a fairly loose adaptation of the book. It changes a lot of things, condenses a lot of things. But honestly, it's probably the best one that I have seen. I've never really been a massive fan of the original Dracula book. The story often comes across as being a bit bloated and dull. This is by far the most fast-paced and fun version of it that I've seen, and that's why it's in at number 10. 9. The Satanic Rights of Dracula. This is from 1973. It's the last film to star Christopher Lee as Dracula, though not the last to star Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. Now, a lot of these 70s movies are not very popular with the Hammer purists, but I'm not one of those, so tough. I like good movies, that's as simple as that. And I like movies that push the envelope and do things differently. Satanic Rights is basically a sequel to the earlier Dracula AD 1972, which puts the action in the then modern 70s. And Peter Cushing is basically playing Van Helsing's grandson, conveniently called Van Helsing. And Dracula was resurrected in the previous movie. He's back again, only this time we've got a kind of an elaborate plot. He's like the shadowy head of a nefarious corporation that and a cult that's got a number of government ministers and high-ranking people in it, and they're basically developing a deadly new strain of the bubonic plague because Dracula has decided he's fucking fed up of eternal life and he wants to die, basically. But being the kind of narcissist that he is, he doesn't want to die alone. He wants to take the whole of humanity down with him. I really like Satanic Rights. It's a mixture of kind of old school Hammer horror with like 70s conspiracy thriller. I dug it. In all honesty, this was the one that actually got me into the Hammer movies. There was this set of like 50 old horror movies that I bought on DVD. Most of them, including Satanic Rights, really awful transfers. It was like a full screen, terrible, like almost like a TV rip. I don't know about a DVD rip. Really awful picture, and yet it won me over. I was intrigued enough to put up with the crappy picture and to watch it, and I really liked it, and I got the Blu-ray and I started seeking out the other Hammer movies, especially the Dracula movies. So I dig it. 8. Dracula AD 1972. I think I put this slightly above Satanic Rights simply because, well, a couple of reasons, I guess. The second string villain to Dracula is Christopher Neame, the wonderful British actor Christopher Neame. Doctor Who fans will know him from Shardar, of course, and he's in Secret Army and various other things. The guy's had a long and very distinguished career, and he's great as the second string villain who's basically operating on Dracula's behalf and luring people in to get killed. And he's great, and honestly, I think this has probably the most exciting and tense showdown since the original Dracula. The showdown, it really is quite thrilling, and I like the fact that this Van Helsing is, even though it's Peter Cushing, it's somewhat different than the original Van Helsing, because he's actually scared. I mean, the original Van Helsing is very much kind of, righteous fury and anger, and he's going to destroy these bloody things. And this Van Helsing, he's freaking scared. He can't believe this is actually happening. He doesn't want to do this, but Dracula kidnaps his freaking granddaughter, so he's not got much choice in the matter other than to go in for a confrontation. And the fact that he's obviously scared kind of increases the tension, as well as the fact that Peter Cushing is significantly older and looks a little bit more frail, whereas Christopher Lee looks as powerful and domineering as ever. Again, I know this movie is not popular with some of the Hammer fans. I think it's great. That's my opinion. 7. Scars of Dracula. Oh my, another unpopular one. This is absolutely hated by some. Again, this was one of the ones that I most enjoyed. Again, it's partly down to the cast, because we haven't got Peter Cushing, and while we still got Christopher Lee as Dracula. We also get Patrick Troughton as Dracula's manservant. We get the Second Doctor, and the central hero is a young Dennis Waterman, who's sadly just left us, with a very la posh accent. And I just find this really fun. It's just wonderful. It's got a great kind of kick-ass start. It really kicks into gear straight off. It's just got a wonderful gothic atmosphere the whole way. I really enjoyed Scars of Dracula. One of my favourites. Sorry. 6. The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. The very last Hammer kind of vampire movie. The last time that we see Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. Again, this is not very popular with the purists. I loved it because it's wild and wacky. It's set in the Far East, and it's like a mixture of Hammer horror with vampires and a kung fu action movie. And I thought it was absolutely delirious fun. The only kind of qualm I have with it is the completely unnecessary, which was apparently down to the American distributors, inclusion of Dracula, but because Christopher Lee didn't want to come back, we have a different actor playing him for like 2 or 3 scenes, and it's like, why? Because we had an earlier movie in this series called The Brides of Dracula that simply has a different head vampire, not Dracula, even though it's still Peter Cushing. And given this setting, there's no reason why you couldn't do this here. Again, I know it was down to the American distributors. They wanted Dracula, but presumably they wanted Christopher Lee and not somebody else. So I don't think that worked. I think there's a hint of a line in it from Peter Cushing that kind of acknowledges the fact that he looks different, yet he still recognizes him, but it doesn't actually make any freaking sense. But if you can get over that, this is actually really fun. This is a really fun action horror. I dug it. 5. The Vampire Lovers. This is one of the few kind of movies Hammer movies that's completely void from the main Dracula franchise. Still got Peter Cushing, albeit not as Van Helsing, a completely different role, and it's a relatively small role. This one's got George Cole in it, of course, so you've got Terry and Arthur in different Hammer movies, which is cool. It's really good gothic vampire movie with hot lesbians. I mean, what more can a man ask for? Seriously. Oh balls, I've screwed this up. I've put Scars of Dracula twice. Oh well. Okay, let's put this next one actually in where Scars of Dracula won. Taste the Blood of Dracula. I'll throw that one in as well. I don't think it's quite as good as the other one on this list, but it's still pretty good. Yeah, screwed that up a bit, didn't I? Oh well. Number 3. Now finally moving away from the Hammer vampire movies. My third favourite vampire movie is Salem's Lot. Now I suppose you could quibble whether you put this one in there because it was originally a miniseries and then they've made it into a movie, and the miniseries version is better. But I'm including it anyway, whether you like it or not. The original late 70s Salem's Lot, iconic. It still stands up. It's still scary. It's got a great cast. James Mason's fantastic. Those vampire kids floating outside the window at night and scratching on the window, that'll never not be freaky as hell. I don't see the modern remake coming remotely close. Sorry. Call me an old fart. Nah. Stick with the original. It's a classic. 2. Fright Night Part 2. Now, I know this will again be a controversial one. I'm talking about the original Fright Night Part 2, not any of the modern remake nonsense. I know this will be controversial. I prefer the second one to the first one. I loved the first one back in the day. I don't know whether it's just not aged well or whether I've just seen it too many times because I just can't really sit through it now. I do think the second one's better. I like the second one more. It's more fun. It gets going quicker. Roddy McDowall is in it more as Peter Vincent. He's got a bigger role, and that's always a good thing. And I'm no offense to the ladies. I'm sure they go for Chris Sarandon, but Julie Carmen is rather more like it for me. And I also vastly prefer Tracy Lynn as Charlie's new girlfriend, Alex. Better actress, absolutely gorgeous, and a better character. I'm sorry, Amy's just a bit of a whiny wimp. Alex is awesome. She's almost like a proto Hermione Granger in that she's this bookish nerd who's completely freaking gorgeous despite being a bookish nerd, and who turns into a complete freaking badass. Because the film doesn't just subvert the original by having a female vampire instead of a male vampire as the main villain. It subverts the kind of the other roles, because obviously in the original, Chris Sarandon goes after Charlie's girlfriend, and Charlie has to team up with Peter and go rescue her and kill the vampire. And here it's Charlie himself who's the target, partly because it's out of revenge for what he did in the first movie. And Alex teams up with Peter Vincent to go rescue Charlie, and she turns into a complete freaking kick-ass action heroine. I love her. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry, but yeah, it's probably my second favorite vampire movie of all time. Number 1. It's a tough call, but I think it's got to be Let the Right One In, the late 2000s Swedish movie. Forget the remake. I rented the remake once. I watched about 15 minutes. It looked like a copy and paste job without any of the real atmosphere of the original. Forget it. Go for the Swedish original. Don't be such a fucking wuss about subtitles. It's very easy once you get started. And the original, to me, it's absolutely superb cinema. The performances, especially from the young leads, are amazing. The atmosphere is fantastic. And the ambiguity surrounding it all, surrounding Eli, the young vampire, and whether or not, what exactly the nature of the relationship is that she's got with Oscar. It's very dubious as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, or whether she actually cares about him, or whether she's just grooming him to be her new human protector. And we saw what happened to her first one. I love Let the Right One In. It's a cracking piece of cinema. Probably my favorite vampire film of all time. Thanks for listening. Talk again soon.